Just a few decades after winning independence, the United States went back to war with Britain in the War of 1812. At the center of the conflict was Britain's war with Napoleon's France. Obsessed with stopping Napoleon, the British blockaded the American coastline to halt cargo ships bound for France. This did not set well with the United States. The second thing that riled Americans was something called impressment.
Impressment was a semi-official form of kidnapping. British sailors would come on board American ships and seize off American sailors. They claimed that they had been British sailors. They were deserters from the British Navy. Sometimes they were, very often they weren't.
So on May 11, 1812, the U.S. declared war on Great Britain. Though the two sides fought several battles on U.S. soil, they were basically at a stalemate after 2 years. Then in 1814, the British defeated Napoleon and turned their full attention to the U.S. and immediately shipped reinforcements to America.
The reinforcements the British sent were probably the best soldiers in the world at the time. They had been campaigning against Napoleon on the European continent for years. They were battle-tested and very experienced.
In August 1814, they marched into Washington, D.C. and burned the Capitol and White House. President Madison fled to the countryside.
When the British attacked the east coast of the United States and invaded Washington, it was the most humiliating moment in American history. And one of the ironic things is that it took place at a moment when the causes of the war were largely dissipating. Well, with the end of the war against Napoleon, the British had no incentive to seize American ships anymore, and they pretty much lost their incentive to seize American sailors. So those two principal causes of the war simply vanished at that point.
It was clear neither side could gain a decisive advantage. So on December 24, 1814, Britain and the U.S. ended the war by signing the Treaty of Ghent in modern-day Belgium. But before news that the peace treaty had been signed crossed the Atlantic, Britain and the U.S. fought the war's biggest battle at New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson commanded a small army unit with some unlikely allies.
Jackson's army at New Orleans was the most motley crew perhaps in American military history. It consisted of pirates, of slaves, of former slaves, of Haitians, of Spanish, of just about anybody Jackson could talk or dragoon into service in New Orleans. And most of them didn't even want to fight, but they were more frightened of Jackson than they were of the British. So between the two, they figured they better fight.
This motley crew of 4,000 faced more than 10,000 British soldiers and saved New Orleans. Ironically, in the end, very little had changed because of the war. No new lands were gained or lost, though nearly 24,000 American and British soldiers died.
The War of 1812 is one of the strange ones that ends on basically, well, what they call the status quo ante bellum. They just said, let's forget we ever fought the war and go back to where we were before it started.